Hey, everyone. Thank you. It's really great to be here again. One of the things I want to kind of say at the outset is that this may not seem like a conventional Google talk. What I want to do is just share with you a little bit about how we think about building the portfolio for Daydream. It's something that I typically share with developers in person, but the more that we get out there, the more that we're building up this portfolio, it became important for us to think about how we share that out a little bit more broadly. So I have a pretty generic title, Game Strategic Lead, but what that really means, I'll unpack it a little bit for you, is the day job part of it is managing the featuring and support of key partners on Google Play, ranging from AAA partners to indies to startups to studios, everything in between. But also, our group also manages support for fast emerging platforms. Right now, that means Daydream. So I manage the outreach for our VR games portfolio for the Daydream launch. Now, here's what I'm going to be covering in my talk. First up is Daydream itself. Let's make sure everyone's on the same page as to what we're talking about. Daydream is Google's high-quality mobile VR platform, powered by Android and Google Play. This video shows off exactly what it is in a better way than I could describe it, so let's just go to it. The bass in here is really great. Yeah, absolutely. So let's break this down a little bit. There are 4 main elements to Daydream. First up is Daydream-ready smartphones, so very high-end flagship phones from our regular OEM partners. Next up is the Android operating system. So the VR platform is basically a VR mode that is already in the N upgrade. So about 80% of the switches and upgrades are related to VR. The next piece is absolutely critical. I'm sure there are a lot of us, myself included, that would just run out and get a new platform because it's cool gear. However, most people are motivated by what kind of experience you can actually get out of that platform. So that's the part that we're going to be talking about most today. The fourth piece is the VR headset and controller. It's a paired set. This is a line drawing right now, but we will be releasing something from one of our OEM partners when we launch the whole platform, and that's going to be this fall. So let's dig deep a little bit into this. We're confident about Daydream because Cardboard was successful. We learned a lot from this. Here are some statistics that we've released recently. All of these numbers are actually higher at this point. The piece that's particularly interesting, or I want to kind of call attention to, is the curve that you see for the installs of Cardboard apps and games through Google Play. So being powered by Google Play is something that is a key part of this and helps it succeed. So let's dig deeper into what our philosophy is. For us, something for everyone is a key aim for both the store and also the bell curve of the Daydream portfolio. Starting with Google Play, it's the largest store for digital content. And over the past year, over 65 billion apps and games have been downloaded from the store. But gamers, players are a diverse and vibrant community. We can't necessarily be a store where one size fits all. That doesn't make sense. Instead, our approach is to have something for everyone. We feature accordingly. Diversity of content is a key value. And this carries through to how we're programming Daydream. Now, I want to talk a little bit about hardcore. This has come up a couple of times so far. Definitely, hardcore players are important. They are early adopters. And for a lot of the early VR platforms, there's a certain amount of work that you need to go through. You need to have the right PC, you need to have the right drivers, you need to have the right amount of space in some cases. And the reward at the end of that, it's a little bit like playing a game, is the boss level is the types of games that hardcore gamers like. And it's important to have those. The perspective, though, of most people, VR is a brand new thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be a hardcore platform. We have the opportunity, through the way we build this portfolio, to set and establish what consumer expectations are for VR beyond what they might hear about as being kind of a core gamer luxury product. So from our point of view, it's about low-friction VR, where you can get into it without complication. All you have to do is drop the phone in that you already have. You don't need to have any space requirements because you're right there, and no strings attached. But also, a key part of having this opportunity to set expectations with consumers is a chance to reset what the definition of a game is. We don't have to be bound by everything that we've done in the past. We have a chance to redesign and redefine what a game has to be or can be. So let's look at content. There are three elements that we're looking for in shaping this portfolio. One is accessibility of input, of game complexity. We want to make sure that players have the ability to get into the game without it overwhelming them. And there is a way to still preserve the visual fidelity while still having a game that feels like you can really approach it and get into it without it having the game become simple in the process. One way to look at it, one concrete example, I'm not going to be the platform guy that speaks completely vaguely the whole time. One specific idea that we think about a lot is inside out versus outside in. Inside out, the way we think about it is, a first-person perspective or a third-person perspective or a cockpit shooter. These are the type of 3D games that the AAA industry has been developing and making for many decades. And that's something that absolutely should be part of a VR portfolio. Another way that we think about it is outside in, where you are approaching something that you can kind of look around and get different perspectives on. It was mentioned earlier today as kind of a dollhouse model or a tabletop model. The reason for thinking about this is because these types of games are very friendly and accessible to most people. Navigating a 3D world may not necessarily be the thing that most people want to do. Instead, this is approachable and feels safe. The second idea that we want to talk about on content is appeal. Now, brands are kind of an obvious thing. We talk a lot about them. There are many brands that have had a great success. And certainly, sports are things that people around the world understand. The rule set makes sense. There's a common language there. But also, a lot of new IPs get their start because they work toward cute animals, cute robots, cute characters. There's any number of directions that you can go in with this, but to make a game appeal at a very direct, basic level. And I'll go first. What would Jamil like? And this is just me. This isn't the Google hat on. I'm a huge science fiction fan. I would love to see something science fiction in VR, but is something that kind of draws on maybe like Isaac Asimov, where you have a robot series that was such a key part of his writing about thinking through how humans and robots interact with each other. So AI would be a great way to kind of bring this to life. Like, how would you have a game where you could actually communicate with one of these robots and have pitch perfect animation to bring it to life? The conversation might be a bit clunky, but that's okay because they're a robot. But just somewhere to go with this. The third piece is engagement. This is slightly different from the approach that we took with Cardboard. Cardboard was relatively constrained in what it could do. There was input right on the headset. And it also kind of lent itself to demo experiences. What we're aiming for here that's different is getting people to come back to the platform on a repeat basis. So mobile devs understand engagement. Sports games, we just mentioned before, really it resets the experience that you have each time. persistence in game, perhaps planting a seed and seeing other people plant seeds and see what comes back the next day. This is something that we think about a lot, because this is how we expect VR to really take off. The great thing about a roller coaster ride is it really gives you a rush, but the challenge with that is that people don't go to amusement parks every day. So instead of having that VR headset go back into the closet with other gaming peripherals, what we'd like to see is people engage daily. Now, another way that we look at this is in terms of so I went through the content ideas. So in terms of overall criteria for selecting games for the portfolio, only in VR is something that we talk about and think about a lot, or at least better in VR. We're not looking for existing games with a VR wrapper that doesn't add anything. I mean, that doesn't necessarily get people to adopt your new platform. People can very happily play their existing games on their existing platforms. So what makes this different? Let's take a step back for a moment. So I think this came up earlier today as well, but a lot of the VR content and ideas and approaches are not necessarily something that is a brand new type of experience. This is very natural. Early movies were the same. The first movies in the 1890s were short, one-minute experiences, in some cases borrowing from theater. It took Georges Méliès and his contemporaries in the early 1900s to transform cinema into something completely new, with special effects, scene cuts, and a pressing sense of drama. And fast forward to the 1940s, and we have Citizen Kane, with a variety of different camera perspectives and truly compelling human drama that you just couldn't achieve in quite the same way with any previous form of storytelling. So in much the same way, we're aiming to populate our portfolio with games that really transcend what came before. We're looking for the Citizen Kane of VR. And we're talking to a handful of Orson Welleses out there, and if you know any more, we're absolutely interested in having a conversation with them. Now, how does this tie back to Daydream? So for a lot of what we're thinking about, the tools that we want to put into the next Orson Welles' hands are about a natural human interaction, a natural human interface. It's all well and good to create a virtual world, but a critical part of that is how you interact with that virtual world. So we've paired our headset with a controller that very naturally approximates the ways that people interact with the world. It's about our heads and hands working together. Here's a little bit more detail on what's going on with this controller. It's safe and friendly to look at, but there's actually a lot of input and interactivity that's built into it. And with the Daydream controller, we're very excited about the possibilities that developers can come up with. You can hold a tennis racket, a frisbee, a steering wheel, any type of object. And the fact that it's designed to fit in a human hand like a handle, I mean, it's the most natural way that we have been interacting with objects in our real world. That was a clear part of how we thought about this. So what kind of developers are stepping forward? It's really illustrative to kind of look at this. Here's a still from the video you just saw. You see that we have an original Need for Speed adventure from Electronic Arts. We have a new Gunjack game from CCP. And like I said, core games are important. But imagine, if you will, a bell curve of a portfolio that indexes to sandbox, to exploration, to adventure, to puzzle games. This is a Google platform. It will be open. However, it'll be important to make sure that you're on our radar so that you're in the launch portfolio. It will be a very curated, highly curated experience, and so we want to make sure that consumers have a fantastic experience when they get in, that they don't feel that it provides just simple demo experiences or that it makes them sick in any way. So we're taking a very close look at what gets into that launch portfolio, so definitely make sure you connect up with us. So these are the developers that we announced at Google I/O. As you can see, they're a mix of console, PC, and indie developers. And from our point of view, these segments are ones that are naturally adapted to VR. So this is something that we've discovered in managing the store on Google Play. You know, there's this meme that you hear about, that mobile is, the growth is slowing. However, from what we observe, AAA game developers and indie game developers are showing year-on-year growth in spend over 50%. Now, we rarely share inside information on how the store is operating, but we felt that it was important to share this information, that developers of this type, they have a great deal of experience and capability, and it's worth bringing them not just to Google Play, but also to Daydream. Indies have a natural agility because they're concerned with art and innovation. They will definitely be very interested in a new platform, and that's what we're seeing. You'll see a lot of indie developers in the Daydream portfolio. AAA developers have decades of tuning truly genuine engagement for their games. So again, another great segment that's worth tracking. Now, of course, I couldn't help but borrow Dean's perfect tagline for this year's GamesBeat. And what I mean by that in this context, I'm not actually going to say the space battles thing because, you know, there has to be a stop at some point, Dean. But here's what I want to say here. More game industry veterans and developers are joining Google. We're making these decisions about these platforms with developers in mind. Games are a big deal at Google. We have several groups engaged with game developers at any given time, whether it's Google Play or Daydream or Cloud or Chromecast or YouTube. We love games. This year, we introduced Indie Corner on Google Play, which was a dedicated destination for indie games, and we're taking further steps with indies as well. You know, we have this Indie Games Festival that we're launching in San Francisco. It includes we're very interested to see VR and AR submissions as well. But the reason I mention this is that we still act like we're part of the game industry. We still care about games, and we work at Google to help move games forward. We have our hands on some pretty powerful levers, and we intend to use them for the advantage of game developers. And you know, I should point out that this is our vaguely androidinous indie mascot. Unofficially, we call him Blob, but hopefully Mike from marketing doesn't mind me saying this, but we think he's pretty cute. So that's all well and good for Google Play. Now, what about Daydream? The teams working on this portfolio, whether it's our group doing business development, the group that's doing publishing, the groups working with our marketing teams, everybody is there's so many of these people that have come from the game industry that they're influencing the decisions. To give you an example of the impact of that, what you see here is the controller and headset again. Now, the controller is bundled on a one-to-one basis with every headset. This was advocated by game developers on the team so that the ecosystem won't be fragmented. Every developer will be on a level playing field with all Daydream devices. And that's just the first thing that I can say about that. There's a lot of other pieces that are directly tied to game developer-centric goals and interests. Now, one thing I want to make sure is clear. Certainly, folks in the room will have a chance, if you have anything that you think it might be a good fit for either featuring on Google Play or inclusion in the Daydream Games launch portfolio, definitely find me. I'm going to stick around. But if something occurs to you later, or you know somebody who has something great, definitely take a picture of this slide. What these links lead to are forms. The top one there puts you into our back-end system for consideration for featuring. And the next one is brand new, and it also does the same for the VR portfolio. And I'll be the first to admit I'm not necessarily the best at getting back to people on email, but this logs you into our system, and someone will take a look at it. And that's what I have to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jamil.